Hi, my name is Angel and I've been a registered dietitian since 2012. And right now I'm just going to show you a day in the life of me, a working mom who's trying to prepare some lunches for my kiddos to bring. And what I'm about to show you, I'll actually show you how to modify it for if you have little ones that are, going to daycare as well. Now, as I get ready to show you these things, just a quick disclaimer that all of the information I share with you today is general in nature. It's for general information purposes only. It's not meant to replace any advice or recommendations that have been made by your healthcare provider. If you do have any medical conditions that you require a discussion with for specific guidelines and whatnot, you do want to speak with your healthcare provider. All right, and so for details, you can always visit our website for the full disclaimer there. Okay, so in an earlier live streaming episode, I actually just finished making flaxseed waffles as well as a chia seed jam. And so if you're interested in how I made those, please check out that video. Right now what I'm doing is after that stream, I have all these extra waffles that I made that were not eaten. So I'm honestly just going to show you what I do. As a working mom, I honestly I'm so grateful that my kiddos don't mind having a cold lunch. And so I don't have time in the mornings to microwave something, put it in a thermos so that they have a hot lunch. It's just not my life right now. But I also remember doing this when my kiddos were little. So the daycare that they went to actually had requirements that you do not bring a lunch or any food that was meant for them that required heating. And that's understandable because maybe the daycare has 20 kids. They can't be microwaving every kid's lunch. That's just not realistic. By the time the last kid's lunch gets heated, lunchtime is over. So I'll show you how to work with that. And first and foremost, you do want to kind of gather the items that you're going to have. In this case, I have waffles, I have jam, and I'm going to show you how to make it nut-free as well. Because most daycares, most schools actually have a nut-free policy to avoid sort of unintentional kind of exposures to children that do have anaphylactic allergies to nuts. And so what I'm going to introduce you to, if you don't already know, is there is one option of such nut-free butters is something called wild butter. So wild butter is actually made from soy. And it's, in this case, this brand makes it with whole toasted soy, some pressed soy oil, cane sugar, some sustainable modified palm oil, and sea salt. Now, certainly you can buy whatever nut-free option that your family likes best. This is just one that my kiddos like. And actually my son is, as I say that out loud, I'm hearing my son's voice. He's growing out of love for it, and that's okay. But I'm hoping that this will be a nice option for your child to just try. Now, soy is a potential allergen, so if your child is 6 months, just starting solids, hasn't been exposed to soy yet, you do want to try this just on its own before you go and start adding it into things, okay? So let's get started. I have a lot of different food containers, so I will show you kind of, and one fell to the back. Let me show you different options. So my son is 8 as we speak, and his appetite is sometimes larger than mine. And so I don't know where your child is at, and we always want to just make sure that there's enough food and to apply no pressure if lunch boxes, snack boxes come back not fully eaten, because children need to be able to have the freedom to decide whether or not they're going to eat and how much they're going to eat. All right, so of course you might have other containers, but this is just what I have and what I prefer to use. So let's just use our waffles, leftover flaxseed waffles that actually have a lot of fiber and protein in them, and just deciding which knife to use. This might be overkill, but this is what I have. All right, so You can actually do this at the same time as making your own lunch, because actually, as I'm saying this, I want you to know that a lot of caregivers actually take care of their children's meals, making sure that they would never send their child off to school without food and a water bottle, and yet so many parents will then starve. They make sure the kids are off, and then what do? Well, they skip breakfast. They delay it for many hours, because after they're done chauffeuring their kids off to school, they have to rush to work. And then they arrive to work, they might not have eaten breakfast. It's around lunchtime, and what do? They either skip that too, or they end up going to where it's convenient. So many of my clients struggle with this. It's that my kids eat better than I do because I take care of them, and who's out there to take care of me? You gotta take care of you. Like, how many of us, like I personally, both my parents are gone now, they passed away. But every family is different, and I just want you to know that sometimes you gotta treat yourself as a caregiver as an additional child. If you have 2 kiddos, pretend you have 3. That third one is you, because I'm not saying that you are needing to put yourself higher and make yourself a higher priority than your children and have guilt associated with that. Trust me, I know mommy guilt. I have some right now as I'm live streaming to you, and my children are being looked after by the grandparents. But I'm just saying, as caregivers, we need to make sure that we take care of ourselves, even across the board, because if we keep putting ourselves lower and lower, we're gonna burn out. And I don't want any moms, any caregivers out there to burn out and have so little left that they're not able to care for their kids anymore to the degree that they want to, you know? So now that that's on our mind, let's just, for sake of like easiness, like let's just pretend the largest container is is mine, this one's my son's, and I don't know. We'll go with the flow. I'm not quite sure. I might just grab another one of the same, okay? So, like for myself, an adult, like maybe I need 2, maybe I feel like 3, I don't know. But to be on the safe side, like maybe I'll give myself kind of 3 pieces. I don't know. Now my son, again, he's 8, but I don't know how much more he's gonna eat when he's like a teenager, but sometimes it's like, I'm not trying to judge how much he eats, it's just still surprising, like despite my profession. Okay, so like my son, he might do 2, he might do 3. It kind of depends on how quickly he wants to eat his food and go into the playground to play, you know what I mean? So maybe I'll leave it at that. Now, my daughter, actually as I'm doing this, like she might actually prefer to have just 2 pieces, because my daughter, she tends to be a bit of a slower eater, and I don't want to give her pressure, because sometimes that's what she feels, is pressure to finish everything. And she can actually eat things like whole, so I'm just going to leave it like that for her. Okay, now when they were younger, I actually used containers like these to separate everything. They're smaller. I actually had one that was even smaller. And how I would modify that is, let me just take a piece out of here, is by the time my kiddos went to daycare, like my son was, I think, 11 months old. And my daughter was older, actually. It was pandemic times. But anyways, like for my son at that stage, like I could just cut things up like kind of finger pieces, and I could just like kind of put it like that for him. And over in this cubby, I would put yogurt as well, because for snacks, I try to aim for 2 food groups. So in this case, this would be the whole grains, this would be the protein option, and if it was a meal, then I would aim for 3 to 4 food groups. So in which case I could do this, a yogurt, and plus I might put something else in here like fresh fruit to make the 3. So for example, like right now I've got the leftover waffles here, and that's great. But how am I going to turn this into more complete meal? Well, I do have these lovely fresh pears, and I'm going to wash them up. So pears are actually one of the highest fiber fruits ever, especially if you eat them with the skin on. There's actually, depending on the size, about 5 grams of fiber in about this tennis size amount. So I keep the skin on for all the edible skins of things. And oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to show you this. Like when you have a pear, the way to check if this is ripe enough is you just go to the stem and you press down. And if the indent kind of stays, it's soft right where the stem is, then it's nice and ripe. If there's a lot of resistance, you can't actually push it down, then it's actually underripe, and it's probably not very sweet. Unless you like that, I think I would just wait until when you press down, it's more ripe, so it's more juicy and delicious. So for an adult, I realized I could just bring the whole piece of fruit, but sometimes needing to wash that fruit and maybe not having a kitchen where you are, or maybe you work off-site and you just, like, it's hard enough finding a washroom, let alone a kitchen sink to do things. Like, you just want to make life easy for you. Pretending that, well, why is Starbucks or other places with grab and go so popular? It's because it's all ready. You peel back that film container, you just gotta have clean hands to eat it. So a lot of times I make picnic style lunches for myself as well as for the kiddos. Okay, so for fresh fruit, of course, I can just chop them into pieces for my own lunchbox. And I would do the same for my school-age children, you know. However much, okay? Like, you can work on the portion sizes because you know your kids and yourself the best. So I'm just kind of showcasing like what you could do. Now, even for daycare, like for an 11-month-old or whatnot, like they could totally do this, right? But what if your child was a little bit younger? Well, when they're a little bit younger, you might actually want to chop off the peel so that you can, depending on how old your child is when they enter daycare, because not all countries or not all places or not all jobs have paid maternity, parental leave, and it's a reality that, you know, not all of us have social supports in place. Like we may not live in the same city as our family who could usually help us with watching the child. So maybe they're gonna be put in daycare sooner than we would have preferred. And that's our life and that's our reality, right? Now, assuming that your child needs to be put in earlier before they're ready to have more textures and whatnot, like perhaps removing the skin, because skins can be hard for younger ones, like maybe they're only like 6 to 9 months old, or you know, maybe they just simply, maybe they're older but they simply don't have that developmental skill yet for safety wise to have the edible skins just yet. Like what you can do is you can modify the texture. So pretending that your child is okay now with a mince texture, then you can just fine chop the pear. And finally mince it. Now, every child is unique, and how quickly they develop, depending on whether or not your child was born premature, like whatever their corrected age is, or, you know, there's a lot of factors. So again, this is general information, but if your child is 9 months old, for term babies, or 9 months old corrected age for our preemies, and they're still not able to tolerate kind of lumpy textures, then you do want to speak with the healthcare provider, their pediatrician, just to make sure, rule out that there's nothing else going on that might be disinhibiting your baby from being able to tolerate that. Now, this is kind of a lumpy mince texture, and you could totally add that, because a child care center that's licensed to care for a child that young would be able to help feed a little bit here if your child is able to self-feed with their hands or using a baby spoon. Like, that's all right, you know. So you can put it into a little container like that, and you could do the same thing for the waffles. You know, if you are doing baby-led weaning and the child care center is able, you can just use a different container, and you can actually do this. Like, just make sure that the waffles are kind of cut to a 2-finger length, width, with enough for the baby to kind of grab and bring to their hand. And you can notice that these, I would remove the skin, and again, kind of chopping it to that degree, and your baby-led weaning baby could actually, you know, handle that. It could be wherever just your baby's developmental abilities are. So you could do that. Okay. And then, but if your child needs, you know, pureed, then you could actually just throw this into a blender without anything and just kind of do that. But an alternative method is that research now tells us that we don't actually need, babies don't actually need to have pureed. Now there's exceptions for everything, but let me just show you that, like, if your fruit is ripe enough, I realize I'm doing this on a cutting board, but like, I just want you to be able to see the textures better. You can actually just use a fork and press, and that fruit will just become fruit sauce right before your eyes. You know, you don't really need to go and buy applesauce or whatnot for certain fruits like this. So you can see how, you know, lovely that puree or that mashed consistency is, and it's a bit more textured. Now, I can tell you from my years as a general outpatient dietitian is that a lot of adults deal with issues with food textures, and there is research to show that, you know, the more we ensure that babies are having different food textures and definitely lumpy textures by the time they're 9 months old and no later, that it actually improves their ability to kind of accept textures later. So like, I could keep doing this to create the amount that I think my child needs, but see, it's nice and mashed, and I no longer have baby spoons, but like this child spoon, like you can kind of see, baby does not need to have teeth to start solids, because they can use their gums and just kind of gum it, okay? So you can do this. Oh, sorry, I'll leave the lid open so that you can see the different textures. Okay, so far so good. Now, because I told you that I wanted to aim for 2 food groups for snacks and 3 food groups for main meals, like, what are we gonna do about this here? Well, like, first and foremost, there's, I could put boiled eggs in here if my children like boiled eggs, but they don't. So oftentimes I'll put yogurt here, or I'll put a yogurt tube in here. Lately, they've been on a little bit of a cheese kick, so I could put cheese in there as well. But given the wild butter is dry, so just like peanut butter, it's not gonna make it soggy if I pre-put it on in advance. So even with wild butter, they actually come up with a chunky version. So if you're gonna bring this to school for a child that is under 12 months old, like, you do not, or even, yeah, I mean, even after 12 months old, like, probably you don't wanna buy chunky because smooth is always safer. So like, pretending that, you know, this is going for my child that's under 12 months, like, I would just thinly, very thinly spread this on so that there's no glops, okay? Just like that. And if I don't want to make like such a big mess and stay on the good terms with the care providers there because they have to wash my baby's hands and all that, then I would probably make it into a little sandwich like that, so that when my child grabs it, it's still just dry on both sides, you know? So I could do it like that. For the older kids, I could do it like that as well. And again, just my older kids are 6 and 8, so I could buy chunky soy, well better if I so wanted to. But like, this just saves them an extra step. I know some people buy the tiny little containers and expect their child to do that, but then again, I know my kids are always rushing off to go to the playground, so I kind of like to do it for them. All right, so how long do you take to prep the lunches? If I wasn't chatting with you, honestly, it takes me about 10-15 minutes to prep it all, because I quite often will batch cook my waffles or my wraps and stuff, and I really do honestly make my own lunch at the same time as my kids, especially when I'm not working from home. Okay, so now this is kind of the work in progress, but let me show you how I'm gonna bump up the nutrient content even more so, okay? Okay, so what I also wanna do is add some color. So even if your child, or like, even if your child doesn't eat this normally, I encourage you to still put something like this into their lunch or their snack box, so long as they're not allergic, just so that there's an exposure. Now, exposure doesn't equal putting it in their mouths. Like, that's not what this is about. Like, when we say, oh, children or adults need exposure to a certain food X number of times before they're willing to accept it, it doesn't mean that 20, 30 times later that something magical happens and then they're just gonna eat it and love it and ask you to make more of it. But it does mean that we simply need to give kids the chance to be exposed to foods that are nutrient dense for them. Because if you imagine, like, how many times are children exposed to kid-friendly foods like hot dogs, pizza, pop, juice boxes, and all that stuff? The repeated exposure builds familiarity. We're simply saying there's no good food or bad food, but let's even the playing field and offer more exposure to things as well. So first and foremost, make a pact with yourself. You're gonna not be upset if these things come home untouched, because that's not what this is about. This is about giving your child the opportunity to choose it. It's their responsibility to choose it at all, or how much you're gonna have. So I'm gonna just throw a bit of this into their lunchbox, into my lunchbox. I know the white part actually bothers my daughter. So sometimes I'll give her a little bit just to challenge her acceptance level, or to at least witness it and be exposed to it, like I said. But then I'll do it like that. Now, babies that are under 12 months old should not have raw vegetables, so that's why you didn't see me kind of put it over here. And why is this nutrient dense for children and babies is that the nutrition in this case for children is that there's extra fiber. So sometimes what happens to babies that are just entering daycare or a school environment, it's that they get so stimulated by all the new that they're just so distracted and curious and wonderfully captivated by this new environment, new people, and new everything. And it may actually cause them to eat less. But sometimes as caregivers, we then worry because most of the food is not eaten, or they start developing maybe some mild constipation because their food intake goes lower, and as a result, their fiber intake goes lower. Maybe they're so distracted and engaged at other things at school that they even forget to drink their water. Now, these are all issues that are, of course, important to address, but know that in a lot of cases, these issues resolve themselves as they get more and more familiar with the environment. It feels like maybe a secondary home, and then they just kind of like relax, just like they relax at home, and are able to participate more in the eating. So by giving them nutrient-dense foods like these flaxseed waffles that are rich in fiber, as well as omega-3s, and as well, if you so wanted to, Like, of course, there's fiber and vitamin C and other nutrients and the fruits and veg. You can even bump up the fiber content and the omega-3 content. That's really great for vision and brain development of babies and children and for adults by adding some of this chia seed jam. Again, nut-free. So for your child that might be a bit older, it's okay if there's still kind of lumpy bits. Like there's some blueberries in this chia seed jam that didn't quite, break down when we were making it. For a younger child, you definitely want to avoid having that because you don't want whole fruits or whole round fruits that become a choking hazard. So you want to I'm going to open this one up, and it would be like almost like a peanut butter sandwich, but in this case a nut-free wow butter kind of sandwich, and just thinly spread that. And there's no added sugar in this. You can go to the other live pre-recording and see that this chia seed jam doesn't have added sugar in it unless you want to add some. Okay, so that's how we're packing in a lot of nutrition there. And so then, like here, like if I so wanted for myself, again, I can add like something else on top. But pretending that these are all completed, I would then just kind of close it up. Had I put something perishable in here, like a yogurt tube, I would add an ice pack. But in this case, like the weather's been warming up for us here locally in Vancouver. So what I'm choosing to do is I'm going to show you. Is I'm choosing to give them a frozen yogurt tube. And when I put things in their lunch kit, like my kids are old enough that they'll kind of decide if they're going to have that as part of their recess or part of their lunch. But like yogurt tubes, I pulled them out of the freezer, obviously. Like you can buy them in the fridge section. And the one that I buy is quite low in added sugar. So it's got 5 grams of added sugar per entire tube. 4 grams of sugar equals 1 teaspoon. And the World Health Organization is trying to recommend that children and adults keep added sugar to less than 6 teaspoons a day. So am I okay that this has a little added sugar? Absolutely. So if it was still refrigerated, I could just bend it and then put it in, and we could do it like that. But frozen is great. Like honestly, you don't have to do anything. You bring it home, you toss it. I just like, because we use so much of it, I just put it into a freezer bag, and I have all these different flavors. So what I'm gonna do is I can just pair this with whatever else I prepare for them, and just add that. Maybe I'll grab another container and pack some like tortilla chips or whatnot to give them variety. But those are all quick items that I can piece together in the morning with very little time. So I guess that's kind of our life and my kind of thoughts on this today. But let me know in the comments if you have meal ideas that you want me to do, or that you're exploring, or maybe that your school or your daycare is putting restrictions on what you can bring. And if I can help you solve that issue, I'd be more than happy to. So do let me know. But yeah, this is kind of how we can get that together. Now, I realize that maybe you're thinking, well, how could I, bump this up and add other things? Like if you so wanted to, you could totally like boil up some eggs, like I said, for yourself. And you could even boil some eggs and then mince that up and put that like in another little container and send that off. But I'm hoping that this gives you sort of a general idea of another option you can make at home. So we are done. Now, I know that took about 30 minutes or so, a little bit over, but let me just show you one last thing. Okay. So, water is the best choice when it comes to what you prepare as a fluid for your kids. And so you definitely want to encourage your children to just choose water between meals, contrary to what some people might believe. Oh, sorry. I know this is a wine bottle. I just like the look of it, and I just repurpose it into a like a water container, okay? So just to make that crystal clear, this is water. It's not any other hard liquor that's liquid. Can you imagine? Yeah, no, I don't do that. So you definitely want to give water, and you want to pair that. The more exposure, again, they have to just enjoying water, the better. And if you wanted to do something a little, if you wanted to do something, like let's say it's like summer where you are, or you live in a really hot place, if you so wanted to bypass an ice pack, then you could actually just buy these bottles, put them in the freezer, freeze them, and then use that as an ice pack instead, so that you don't have to prepare so many things on a busy morning. And then that way, as this defrosts, keeps your food the child's food cold, they can, just drink that. So it's kind of dual purpose. Or that would work if you're going on a family trip and you're trying to save some money by not buying a lot of outgoing food, because eating out is expensive these days. I hope that's a good quick tip for you. All right. Now you may be wondering, like, why do I want like an ice pack for waffles? But I think it's because earlier I had given you other ideas, like putting boiled eggs, putting like the yogurt or the frozen yogurt or cheese. Like those are perishable items, and so you definitely do want to have an ice pack to keep those items cold. If you didn't put those perishable items and like it's really just like this, then this is fine. This doesn't need like refrigeration. But if you did put something perishable, then you definitely need an ice pack there. All right, I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you for spending time with me today, and I hope you have a lovely, lovely rest of your day. Bye. And as I'm cleaning up, come back for more videos like this. I'm going to be live streaming a little bit more often. If the time doesn't work for you, please join us on please watch previously recorded options on our channel. I'd love to see more of you. Thank you. Okay.